Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 1160. Improving. City of Silver, at the top of the spire. After waiting for a long time, Derek still didn't receive a response from Mr. Fool. This made him panic a little. He didn't understand what this meant, nor did he know how to deal with it. Mr. Fool is in a state where he can't respond to his prayers. Yes, he informed us 2 days ago that the gathering next week would be cancelled. This should be a sign. Having recalled what happened previously, Derek barely managed to calm his anxiety and nervousness. He couldn't be blamed for having such a huge reaction, because the City of Silver's textbooks recorded similar situations. The creator who normally responded to his believers suddenly stopped responding and forsook this land. After a few seconds of silence, Derek stood up and returned to the room where the chief was. He said to Colin Iliad, "We have to wait a few more days." "Wait?" Demon Hunter Colin repeated the keyword as he frowned slightly. From his point of view, this was an unusual matter, seemingly symbolizing a bad development. Derek resisted his instinctive reaction of scratching the back of his head, and he nodded with some difficulty. "Yes." The grizzled Colin Iliad stared at him for a few seconds before nodding slowly. "All right, head back first." Backlund East Borough, inside a 2-bedroom rental apartment. Furs, who was wrapped in thick clothes, paced around the warm stove, her face full of doubt. Finally, she turned her head and looked at Zio. "Why hasn't Mr. World replied? Perhaps he's preoccupied with something." Zio explained the reason she had long considered. "Perhaps it's because it's not convenient for Mr. Fool to pass on your prayers. He has temporarily paused the gathering." Furs nodded thoughtfully and said, "Mr. Fool informed us that the gathering will be temporarily paused next week. It was only decided in the middle of the week. Is this related to George III?" Recalling Mr. World's investigations all this time, Zio acknowledged and said, "Very likely. In the forsaken land of the gods, in the dead silent city." Dressed in a classic black mage's robe, Amon led Klein into a relatively complete cathedral. Segmented stone pillars lay tilted, and dark red weeds grew out from their cracks, wrapping around the avian sculptures. With the animal hide lantern in hand, Klein surveyed the area and confirmed that the residents of this city weren't truly dead. There were still a few survivors left. He had no idea what method they had used to transform into monsters of the deep darkness. They were hiding from the faint yellow light, surrounding a cathedral in a place that couldn't be seen. They wanted to attack the 2 ordinary-looking humans, Klein and Amon. The reason why Klein was able to confirm that these monsters were originally residents of this city was because their spirit-body threads had a certain abnormality. Some were grayish-white, some were distorted, and some were sticky. They were completely different from the monsters elsewhere. They greatly resembled the corpses inside the coffins. I don't know what kind of despair and mental breakdowns will make the remaining humans choose such a path. Perhaps the deepest sense of despair was that they couldn't see hope on a daily basis while the situation around them worsened. With a sigh, he made use of this opportunity to adjust his mentality. He was experiencing various instances of hope surfacing, only to be met with despair time and time again. The monocled Amon walked to the edge of the light, and walked all the way into the deepest part of the cathedral. Klein followed behind and saw a door covered in pale white light. "This city is actually split into 2 parts, light and darkness. They're using certain abilities of the apprentice pathway to hide a portion of the area. They have to use a specific door to enter," Amon said as he pointed ahead. "A secret sorcerer's powers?" With some realization, Klein nodded, indicating that he knew what was going on. Amon then said, "Behind this door is the dark side of this city. I can use it to connect to a similar region far away. We can directly arrive there and shorten our journey." As expected of the incarnation of loopholes, Klein watched as Amon stretched out his left hand and pressed down on the door formed from pale white light. The light began to ripple as it rapidly spread outwards, becoming more and more intense. At that moment, a deformed monster hiding in the depths of the darkness while spying on the cathedral suddenly trembled, becoming Klein's marionette. 20 or 30 seconds ago, Klein had already completed the process of obtaining initial control over it and deepened his influence. However, he waited until now before he completely converted it. Right on the heels of that, Klein and the marionette reached out their hands at the same time. They took advantage of the opportunity when Amon changed the door, and they grabbed something. In his hand was something in the shape of a full moon, and was embedded with scarlet gemstones, the scarlet lunar corona. In his marionette's hand was an ancient, brass-colored master key. At the same time, they opened their mouths and made a bang sound. They used their cannons to push the scarlet lunar corona and the master key to the door of light. These two items combined could make one hear Mr. Door's pleas for help. This also meant that Mr. Door's powers could enter the real world to a limited extent. And this was the controller of all doors. He was one of the existences who was most unwilling to see Amon become an error, or control Sapphira Castle. Klein didn't expect that the sealed Mr. Door could really hurt Amon. He only hoped that he could use this opportunity to interfere with the Angel of Time, and create a good enough opportunity for himself. Of course, if Mr. Door could cause any abnormal changes to the door, magnifying or distorting the loopholes created by Amon, thus affecting the King of Angels of the Marauder pathway and teleporting him far away, Klein would definitely sincerely thank Mr. Door for a week. After his previous attempts, Klein realized his greatest disadvantage. It wasn't that he was one sequence short and had a qualitative gap in power level. Instead, he had lost the initiative and couldn't make proper preparations. Every time he began preparing, he would be interrupted or foiled by Amon. For a veteran magician, unprepared performances were often synonymous with failure. If he could make preparations in advance, he could quietly summon Mr. Azek's, Rionette Tinker's, and Snake of Fate Will Septon's historical projections. Against a sequence too, even if there was no way to deal with him, it would definitely create a very good opportunity to escape. At that moment, the scarlet lunar corona and ancient-looking master key whistled through the air and arrived at the door of light. The white light that formed the illusory door distorted and devoured the two items. It was dyed crimson as it collapsed into a whirlpool. It was as though the bottom of the vortex was invisible, like a gigantic eye. Just as Amon was about to turn around, he made a slight pause as if he had heard an old friend's shout. However, this pause disappeared instantly, as though it had never appeared. With Amon's gaze directed at Klein, the latter instantly lost 6 beyonder powers. This included the control of spirit body threads, the summoning of historical void projections, paper figurine substitutes, flame controlling, underwater breathing, and bone softening. Of course, losing these 6 beyonder powers for a marionette didn't affect Klein's subsequent operations. The indiscernible pause from before had allowed Klein to switch places with his marionette in time. He had already arrived deep in the darkness outside the cathedral. The deformed monsters around him trembled and turned into his marionettes. For targets such as these that weren't even sequence 5, it took only 2 or 3 seconds for Klein to transform them into marionettes. And by the time he summoned the scarlet lunar corona, he had already begun doing similar actions. As he enjoyed the darkness without any scruples, he attempted to transform into a concealed state, or successfully commit suicide. At the same time, he reached out with his marionettes to grab at the fog interwoven with history. This time, he split the marionette into 3 groups, summoning Rionette Tinker, Mr. Azek, and Snake of Fate Will Septon, respectively. He didn't want to follow his past mistakes, where he had managed to succeed with great difficulty only to have them taken away by Amon. With such arrangements, he might be left with 1 or 2. Of course, the premise was that Amon was unable to steal multiple historical void projections at once. This was something that Klein needed to confirm. Klein retracted his hand, but he didn't grab anything. All the marionettes who summoned the Snake of Fate failed. Among the scholars of your groups who summoned the Death Consul and Rionette Tinker, 2 of them had their arms tense up slightly. Klein was delighted as he suddenly felt that this attempt could end up turning into a real escape attempt. At this moment, The crystal monocle that Aman wore emitted a terrifying light. The entire city, including the surrounding rivers, hills, and wilderness, were all filled with pure, scorching sunlight. Day had once again descended upon this land after bidding farewell to it for thousands of years. Aman had stolen the day from the ruins of the Battle of Gods. In the face of such a day, not only did Klein feel like his body was about to melt, but he also heard familiar and crazy ravings in his ears. They were like steel needles that pierced through every worm of spirit. This caused his mind to be filled with immense pain. His marionette's summoning attempts had failed while on the brink of success. The day, in the battlefield of the gods, contained the true creator's ravings. The deformed monsters that were hiding deep in the darkness, which were the few survivors of the city, seemed to temporarily regain their senses. They stared blankly at the day, and couldn't help but narrow their eyes. Then, they wildly charged towards the source of that day, melting one by one into dust. Far away in the City of Silver's afternoon town campsite, the guards at the stronghold also noticed that there was a light coming from the northeast. It was different from lightning, just like the scene of the sun rising from the legends. This scene only lasted for a few seconds before it shattered and the sky returned to its dark state. As soon as he recovered from the ravings, Klein saw the pointed-hatted Aman standing in front of him. This angel of time nudged his monocle and smiled. "Well done,